A mysterious fire at a Huawei laboratory. A sign the US wants war with China? And China's new twist on a classic Bible story. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Huawei. It's the Chinese telecom company the US accuses of being a national security threat. It definitely has shady links to the Chinese Communist Party and its military. Well, one of its buildings in China caught on fire. Local officials said it wasn't a Huawei lab, but Chinese media quoted Huawei employees saying the building did in fact have 5G labs. 3 people died in the fire, even though local officials announced there were no casualties before the fires were even put out. No official explanation has been given for the blaze, but a Huawei spokesman did say the new Huawei Y9A phone was lit. But more bad news for Huawei. Nokia is replacing Huawei equipment in Britain after winning a major 5G deal with Britain's largest telecom, BT. Huawei was banned in the UK back in July, and this could be a sign of things to come for Huawei. The United States and Australia have already banned Huawei, and many Western democracies are considering doing the same. But there is some good news for Huawei. It seems like, at their request, China is going to launch an antitrust investigation into Google. Now, this hasn't been confirmed yet. It's according to anonymous sources speaking to Reuters, and I'm always a bit skeptical of those. But the irony of this is almost too much for me to handle. Supposedly, China will be looking into allegations Google has leveraged the dominance of its Android mobile operating system to stifle competition. Yes, China, which has banned every foreign tech company from competing with homegrown Chinese tech companies, is concerned about fair market competition. An Australian think tank has found 380 internment camps in Xinjiang. The Australian Strategic Policy Institute used satellite images and official construction tender documents to map more than 380 suspected detention facilities in the far northwestern region, highlighting internment camps, detention centers, and prisons that have been newly built or expanded since 2017. We actually covered this in depth on a recent episode of our China Unscripted podcast. I'll put a link to that below. But speaking of Xinjiang, the U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill that would force U.S. companies to disclose if they're getting materials sourced from Xinjiang. Xinjiang is known for not only all those delightful internment camps, but also forced labor. It's already illegal for U.S. companies to use forced labor abroad. But in reality, supply chains overseas are often really complicated, with subcontractors and subcontractors, so U.S. companies may not know who's doing the actual product assembly, or they don't want to know. That's why, if enacted, the bill would compel listed companies to declare in annual reports whether they or their affiliated entities imported goods originating in Xinjiang or containing materials sourced there. I can definitely think of a few companies that might want to rethink their supply chains. We now know a bit more about how the Chinese regime uses facial recognition technology to monitor dissidents. According to leaked documents obtained by the Epoch Times, a massive amount of facial recognition cameras have been installed. In Nanjing, a major city in southern China, officials gave orders that pedestrians should be videotaped every 10, 20, and 30 minutes. In China's Inner Mongolia region, where there's been ongoing protests by ethnic Mongolians, authorities have launched the Sharp Eyes Project. In one small city there, local police issued a report saying that the project successfully recognized 1,158 photos of various local key targets. The system identified more than 60 targets for its local domestic security and more than 10 people accused of crimes. China's Domestic Security Bureau offices make up a secret police force tasked with neutralizing individuals that the Communist Party deems to be political threats. Obviously, this is not a good time to be a dissident in China. It's It's also not a good time to be a dissident in Hong Kong, and I'll tell you why after this short break. Welcome back. Hong Kong pro-democracy leader Joshua Wong has been arrested again. Wong was arrested last week for participating in a rally on October 5, 2019, when thousands marched to protest Hong Kong's new anti-mask law. In fact, Shelley, Matt, and I were there for that one too. At the time, authorities had passed a law forbidding people from wearing masks at public gatherings. Of course, after the coronavirus, the government started requiring everyone to wear masks in public. It's hard being an authoritarian regime. Wong's arrest last week came after he had also been arrested in August for his participation in this year's Tiananmen Square massacre anniversary vigil. The good news is Wong has now been released on bail, with plenty of time to spare, so he can be arrested again next month for something else. Joshua Wong's arrest and release came just ahead of China's National Day on October 1st. And Hong Kongers attempted to celebrate National Day by protesting the Chinese Communist Party's crackdown. But the Hong Kong police were just a bunch of big party poopers. Over 6,000 police officers were sent to stop the protests from happening. And they arrested at least 60 people. But according to Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam, this is just proof of how great the Chinese Communist Party's national security law is.
During the last 3 months, we have been able to see clearly in front of our eyes how peace has returned to society as national security has been safeguarded in the city. Once again, the people can enjoy their basic rights and freedom in society in accordance to the law.
We can clearly see how peace has returned to society? Maybe Carrie Lam needs to get her glasses checked. Can't believe it's only been a year since we were in Hong Kong covering the 70th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party's rule. I bet someone in Beijing is looking at these celebrations right now and thinking, boy, Hong Kongers love the Communist Party so much, we should just get rid of the one country, two systems policy. I've never been so sorry to be so right. Does this badge of a U.S. Reaper drone over China mean the U.S. is preparing for war? I'll have more on that after this short break. Welcome back. Does this badge mean the U.S. is preparing for war with China? U.S. airmen publicly showed off a special uniform featuring a patch of an MQ-9 Reaper drone superimposed over a red silhouette of China. The badge was worn during a simulated island assault exercise that wrapped up Tuesday in California. Now, the exercise itself wasn't specifically against China. It was just a simulated island assault drill. Now, sure, China has been building artificial islands in the South China Sea, and Chinese warplanes entered the Taiwan Island airspace at least 46 times in just a week. But just because the U.S. and China might have a fight over islands, and the U.S. airmen were wearing a badge with a Grim Reaper sitting on a drone flying over a map of China, that doesn't mean the drills were in any way targeting China. Of course, my favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, for some reason is very upset. It said any U.S. attack on Chinese islands will be met with a fierce counterattack. China will shoot down incoming U.S. warplanes no matter they are unmanned or manned. But look, just because the Global Times says they'll shoot down U.S. warplanes doesn't actually mean they're talking about shooting down U.S. warplanes. These are all just metaphors, you see. You can interpret them many ways. Also, what the Chinese authorities may not understand is American military units often design their own badges without necessarily being sanctioned by top leadership. I mean, does this really look like an officially designed logo? Speaking of things that can be interpreted many ways, the Holy Bible, a Chinese legal textbook, rewrote a story from the Bible. In the Chinese version, Jesus single-handedly stones a woman to death. Here's the translation. The crowd wanted to stone the woman to death as per their law. But Jesus said, "Let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Hearing this, they slipped away one by one. When the crowd disappeared, Jesus stoned the sinner to death, saying, "I too am a sinner, but if the law could only be executed by men without blemish, the law would be dead." That's a very convenient narrative, since the men who execute the law in China have loads of blemishes. And the Chinese legal system does involve lots of executions. In fact, according to Amnesty International, China leads the world in executions. Speaking of executions, a kindergarten teacher in China has been sentenced to death for poisoning 25 students, killing one. The teacher, her name is Wong, didn't poison her own students. She is convicted of poisoning students of another teacher at the school. Why? Well, the teachers had a dispute over student management questions, the court said, and Miss Wong had sought to poison her rival's class. I guess in a country where the ruling regime has, for decades, brutally persecuted all opposition, I can see how someone might come up with an idea like this. And get this, the woman had poisoned her own husband back in 2017. He survived though, so you can see why she'd still be allowed to be a kindergarten teacher. And now, it's time for me to answer a question from a fan who supports China Uncensored on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Today's question comes from Temuka Venables. Chris, in your view, what's going to happen with Hong Kong? I know they are crushing it with all their might, but Hong Kongers have a different DNA. The rebellion will find a way to explode one way or another. Now that's the million-dollar question. The Chinese Communist Party considers Hong Kong a red line. They will not back down. However, as you say, the Hong Kong people won't back down either. But a lot of the protests will likely go underground. I think the thing to really keep an eye on is the U.S. sanctions on China. For example, we did an episode recently about U.S. sanctions on Hong Kong officials. But basically, U.S. sanctions could devastate the Chinese economy. The economy is the key to the Chinese Communist Party's grip on power. If it loses that, the regime could collapse. At the end of the day, there won't be a free Hong Kong until after the Communist Party falls. But I have a feeling that day is getting closer. And when that happens, the situation could be resolved without a big explosion in Hong Kong. Thanks for your question. And thank you for watching. If you like the show, be sure to hit that subscribe button and share this episode with your friends and family. The Chinese Communist Party really hates when you do that. And if you want to have me answer your questions on the show, along with a bunch of other cool perks, join what I call the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army over at patreon.com/China Uncensored. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.